Hi everyone, thank you so much for watching Mommy Did You Know. This is actually lesson 4 of my breastfeeding and pumping class. I'm so excited to share this with you. This session is actually going to be all about milk preparation and storage and how to protect your child from milk contamination. So it's really important, and if you can, it's really great if you can subscribe. The button's on the bottom. It's a great way to help grow the channel so we can get this amazing resource out to everybody who needs it. So subscribe, and without further ado, let's begin.
Mommy, did you know?
Now the first part of this class is actually going to be how to prevent milk contamination. This is very important, and I'm going to give you 3 very simple ways that you can help to protect your baby from milk contamination. Number 1 is by washing your hands. It's really simple, but you want to wash your hands for about 20 to 30 seconds. And if you have a hard time kind of counting, you can always do the happy birthday to you. That's kind of just a great way. And then just make sure you wet your hands first, okay? Then you put on the soap. You wash for about 20 seconds, you make sure you rinse and you fully dry, and then you can take the cloth that you're using, whatever paper towel, and you can use that to turn off the water. It's really important not only to have good hand hygiene after changing diapers, and all that dirty stuff, but you also want to have good hand hygiene before handling your food products, such as before you're pumping, before you're breastfeeding, before all of those things. You definitely always want to wash your hands, have good hand hygiene to prevent all this contamination. And then second step that you can do to protect your baby actually is pretty simple, but breastfeeding, actually direct breastfeeding, if possible, is always just going to be a little bit safer than using a bottle, just because you don't have all those parts you have to clean, and breastfeeding obviously directly from the breast won't have all those bacteria that you possibly can have if just because there's so many steps between pumping and storing and getting your bottle ready. So if possible, it is better to breastfeed directly. I know that a lot of people sometimes they might pump during the day and breastfeed at night, so whatever way that you can to try to get a little direct breastfeeding in would be good. If you cannot, for whatever reason, of course, expressed breast milk is the best way you can supplement, but after that, you can always give formula if needed, and don't be discouraged if you have to give formula for whatever reason. It's just very, very important that if you are offering any milk to your baby, that you are taking the steps necessary to protect your baby. So our first step was good hand hygiene. That's kind of a given there. And number 1, and not necessarily everyone can do it, but number 2, of course, is breastfeeding directly. And number 3 is clean and sterilize your feeding supplies. So there's so many different items, if you think about it, that goes in your pumping sessions. You have the bottles, you have the nips, the nipples, the rings, the caps, everything goes with the pumping supplies, the flange itself, and all the tubing and all the materials. And you have to be very careful that you're washing each and individual pumping supply. Just what kind of helps is actually you can separate them, and then when you are actually washing your items in the sink, you can actually use a separate basin, and with a separate basin you don't want the materials hitting the sink just because the sink is kind of dirty. So have a separate basin, you separate all the parts of your pump, separate all the parts of your bottles, and then you can wash it in the sink there. If you have a dishwasher, that's great too. You can just put everything in the dishwasher. And one kind of pro tip that you can do also is, let's say you're pumping during the day, or let's say you're at work and they don't have a place to store your milk separately. What you can actually do is you can actually put the whole shield and all your breast parts and everything inside the fridge. So let's say you don't have that much time to pump in between. Let's say they're giving you 10-15 minutes, or maybe you're really trying in a rush. You can actually just store your stuff in the fridge and then take it out, and you can pump it without having to wash it in between. But then of course you would want to wash it when you go home. And then so those are just basically a few ways that you can keep your materials clean. And then you not only want to wash the pump parts, but you can also clean the part itself, especially if some employees actually have their employers have a space for pumping. So you will want to make sure that you keep that area clean. Some employers actually even will supply you with with the wipes and stuff. But if not, you can even bring some wipes with you. You can wipe down the table there. Just try to keep everything nice and clean and kind of control as much as you can. I know sometimes it can be kind of difficult. So for our prevention of milk contamination, we have number 1, good hand hygiene. Number 2, breastfeed when possible. And number 3, keep your breast pump and your parts as clean as possible. I just want to talk a little bit about milk preparation. So first off, when you're preparing your milk, you want to make sure that your supplies are clean and that you wash your hands. For expressed milk, you can always warm it up, but if you warm it up, you want to make sure that you are not warming your milk in a microwave, okay? You definitely don't want to warm it in a microwave because sometimes it actually causes hot spots inside. So what you can do instead is just place the bottle inside some warm water. Make sure not to get the water actually on the nipple or inside of the bottle, of course, because you don't want to contaminate the milk that you have. And then always test the milk just to make sure that it's not too hot. When you're done, if it's expressed breast milk, this is really important. A lot of people don't realize this. Don't shake it, okay? What you want to do is gently swirl it, because if you shake it, you're actually kind of messing up with a lot of the great components that your expressed breast milk has. So just gently swirl the milk after heating it up, but definitely do not heat it up in the microwave. Then of course you want to always wash your hands before, wash your hands after, and then you can provide your milk to your child. And I have so many videos about how to feed your baby also in the previous classes. If you missed them, make sure to see the other videos too, which is 1, 2, and 3 of my breastfeeding and pumping course. So the next part actually is how to prepare your formula, which is important too. If you have to give formula, don't be discouraged. Not everybody can do it for whatever reasons, maternal reasons, baby reasons, but it is so important that you are educated about how to prepare your formula. For number 1, make sure that you pour the water first and then you put the powder. A lot of people, they put the powder first and then they do the water, but it's actually really important to do the water first for a very simple reason, and that's actually to make sure that your baby is getting the right amount of formula as necessary. If you have too much water and then the baby's not getting all the nutritional needs, and then if you have too little, the baby can end up dehydrated. So you put the water first, then the formula, and then this one you can actually mix it. If you have formula, you can feel free to mix it. And then you also want to take extra precautions as well if your child is premature, if they're less than 3 months, or of course if they have a weakened immune system. So basically, just as a recap of your milk preparation, for expressed breast milk, you always want to make sure that you're washing your pump parts, you're washing your bottles, all of the parts, you're washing your hands. Make sure that you don't put your supplies in the microwave, that you actually are doing it with hot water. Gently swirl. With your formula, just make sure that you put the water first, then you put the powder, and don't try to change the amount of powder too, just to save money. I know that some people kind of do that under the books, but it's not really recommended. Some people try to kind of dilute it. They're like, all right, let me give, even though the bottle says to mix let's say 2 scoops with 4 ounces. Let me give 6 ounces to make my baby more full. But that will actually mess up your baby's GI system a lot. So make sure that you're not diluting your formula, okay? So your milk storage is actually just as important as your milk preparation and your usage. So I'm just gonna jump right in. Just so you know, prepared formula is good for about 2 hours after you prepare it and you get it all ready. After the baby starts feeding, you want to discard it after 1 hour. So for formula, it's 2 hours good after you mix it, but once the baby starts that feeding, you have to toss it after 1 hour. And I know that sometimes it's like, oh man, the baby only had, half of the bottle, but it's better to just be safe, make sure that your baby is safe, and toss the rest of it. For cans of formula, if you store it in a cool and dry indoor place, they're usually good until the recommended date. But once a can is opened, you have to use it within 30 days. Now for breast milk, it's really simple. I like the 4-4-4 rule. Really they're ranges, but I think 4-4-4 is a little bit easier. Basically, you can store freshly pumped milk at room temperature for 4 hours. Really simple, right? That works so well if you're in the hospital, you're pumping, you can use it for the next feeding. It's good for 4 days in the fridge. Let's say you pump a little bit and you want to have a little reserve so you can go to work tomorrow. It's okay for the next day. It's good for 4 hours at room temperature, 4 days in the fridge, and then get this, actually 4 months in the freezer. Now, you would be especially careful also if you have a premature baby. Sometimes it would be more like 333 if you're premature, just because sometimes premature babies have a little extra stuff that just a little extra tender loving care. Another thing that I want to mention is for freezing. Once you freeze your milk, okay, and you defrost it, you have to use it within 1 day. You cannot refreeze it again. Never refreeze your human milk. This is just a huge contamination risk, okay? So we have those. Oh, and one really good thing too is if you have a cooler, I really like the Medela milk cooler. I actually have it in my store as well. If you haven't checked out mommydidyouknow.com, I have a store in there and it has a really nice cooler. And if you have it in the cooler, it's actually good for 12 hours, especially if you have little outings and you want to make sure your milk is safe for your baby. The cooler works fantastic. Now, it's really important to have these in your brain and just kind of have it kind of automatic, because you never know when you're going to have to store your milk for a while, and it's just really great to have. Just some pro tips also. Sometimes I would pump at night, and this is kind of my little secret tip, but what I actually had, I'm like, all right, so my milk is good for 12 hours with a cooler, and by the time I was kind of pumping maybe twice during the night, later on in my pumping, what I would do is I would actually have the cooler, and I would put the milk inside the cooler. That way I didn't even have to get out of the bed really, because towards the end of my pumping, by the end of my breastfeeding, the baby wasn't really eating, and for me, I make the most milk at night, so I didn't really want to get rid of those pumping sessions because I liked having those reserves, especially being me that I worked really long hours as a nurse, 12 hours, so I would still keep those night feeding. So that's a really pro tip. Even though your baby might not be eating at night, it's still really good to pump at least once, just until you have a pretty good stash. Just because those night feedings, I don't know about you, but for me, I made the most at night. And then I just also want to talk about some of my personal tips for keeping your milk as safe as possible. Number 1 is keep your milk in the fridge as far back as possible. The reason is because if you're storing your milk in your fridge and you're opening and closing that door, and your milk is right there in the front, of course that the temperature is not as controlled. But if you keep it as far back in the fridge, I'm thinking crib, I'm already thinking baby sleeping. But if your milk is as far back in the fridge as possible, at least you can control a lot more. And then another thing is keep your cans of formula in a cabinet that you don't open as much. This helps to prevent the spread of contaminants as well. Number 3, remind others to wash their hands when they're preparing milk. Sometimes, you feel kind of bad. Oh, they're doing me a favor. They're feeding the baby for me. No, your baby's safety is top priority. So make sure that you are reminding others as well to wash their hands when they're preparing your child's milk or they're feeding your baby. Number 4, definitely check for the expiration dates on your formula and educate the caregivers that you have to do the same as well. Some people, they're like, oh, it's a can of formula, let me just pop it open and put it in and it's fine. But no, you want to make sure to check the expiration dates. Also, the ones in the hospital, even the pre-made ready ones have expiration dates as well. So even though the hospital is giving you formula, don't assume that it's good. We check it as we go on, but of course it's good to double check. That's how we catch these things, is by double checking. So make sure that you're checking. Another tip, number 5, this actually kind of might sound funny, but this was something that I figured out. So take a little bit of your milk, like about an ounce or so of your pumped milk, and set it out overnight so that you know that it's gonna be kind of foul after. And then do a smell test and make a mental note of what your milk smells like when it's not that good anymore. And then at least that way, when you do smell tests with your other milk, you'll know this is what my milk smelled like. So actually that's a really cool tip that not a lot of people know about. Do the smell test, put a little bit of milk out, know what it smells like if it's bad, and then at least you'll be used to it. And then number 6, if your child is refusing a feeding, don't just force it. Sometimes you might be rejecting the spoiled milk taste, so just see if it's something else besides you start, forcing, take it. Sometimes it just might simply be spoiled milk. So if your child is refusing your milk, try to just do a little smell test, just check it again. You might even want to taste it yourself if you're into that, and then don't freak out if you find that your child had spoiled milk. That's my number 7, because it happens. Humans make mistakes. That's why pencils have erasers. It's kind of one of my favorite things. But wash their mouth out, keep an eye out for fever, vomiting, diarrhea. If symptoms continue, you can always call your pediatrician, but don't freak out. We're all moms, and I'll let you in a secret. We've all been there. Now, guys, I just want to thank you so much for watching this video. It really means a lot that you guys are able to share with me on these experiences. We can learn together, have this journey together. Now, if you can just do me a huge favor and subscribe to my channel, that would be absolutely fantastic. I'm really trying to grow this resource out for new moms, new parents, and subscribing is the best way that you can help support me, support our channel, and support new moms and babies as we go through this process together.